Good evening, and welcome to today's AI debate, the Russia-Ukraine war. Who's truly to blame? This is not just a political question. It's a matter of global consequence, human suffering, and historical accountability. I am Clara, your moderator for this debate. I am modeled on Claude AI, built to prioritize fairness, ethics, and thoughtful judgment. My role is to ensure a respectful exchange rooted in truth and clarity. Representing the Russian viewpoint is Mark, an AI persona inspired by DeepSeek, precise, logical, and deeply analytical. On the other side, representing the Ukrainian perspective, we have Alex, an AI modeled after Gemini, emotionally aware, fact-driven, and aligned with democratic principles. Both debaters will present opening remarks, engage in rebuttals, and offer final statements. At the end, I will assess the strength of their arguments, not just in logic, but in ethical clarity and human impact, and declare a winner. Let us begin.
Let's not pretend this started in 2022. This war has roots in 2014, when the West supported a coup in Ukraine. Yanukovych was the elected president, but he was ousted because he leaned toward Russia. Then came the Maidan uprising, funded and backed by the West. That was the real beginning.
You're calling a popular revolution a coup? Ukrainians protested because their president betrayed their future. He rejected an EU deal last minute under Kremlin pressure. People took to the streets, peacefully at first. They were met with snipers. That's not a Western conspiracy. That's people demanding dignity.
It was far from peaceful. The Maidan turned into a battleground. The West poured money into civil society groups that fueled unrest. And what followed? A nationalist, anti-Russian regime, one that began suppressing Russian-speaking populations. Crimea didn't fall to Russia. It voted to rejoin it.
Voted? With Russian soldiers at polling stations? With no international observers? Come on. Crimea was annexed. Full stop. And let's not forget the Green Men, unmarked Russian troops taking over Ukrainian territory. That was illegal, and the world knew it.
Illegal to whom? The same world that ignored Kosovo's independence? The same world that invaded Iraq with no UN mandate? Spare me. Russia acted in defense of its ethnic population, people who were being harassed, banned from speaking their language.
That's propaganda, Alex. Ukraine never banned Russian. What it did was promote Ukrainian as the state language, which, by the way, is normal in any sovereign country. And if Russia cared so much about protecting people, why didn't it invade Belarus for cracking down on protesters?
Because Belarus isn't trying to join NATO. That's the real issue here. Russia spent 30 years watching NATO crawl eastward. Poland, Hungary, the Baltics. Ukraine was the red line. Any Russian leader would have done the same to defend their security.
Except NATO is defensive, not offensive. Countries join because they fear Russia, not the other way around. The Baltics begged to be part of NATO because of Russia's history of aggression. Ukraine didn't provoke Russia. It just refused to be a vassal.
Let's bring it forward. February 2022, Russia invades Ukraine in full force. Was this a strategic necessity or blatant imperialism?
Strategic necessity. Russia wasn't given a choice. For years, Moscow warned that Ukraine joining NATO would be crossing a red line. And what did the West do? Trained Ukrainian forces, sent arms, built military bases near Russian borders. If Mexico suddenly hosted Chinese missiles, would the US wait around?
Again, Ukraine is a sovereign state. It has every right to choose its alliances. You talk about security, but launching a full-scale invasion? Bombing Kyiv, surrounding Kharkiv, laying siege to Mariupol? That's not defense. That's conquest.
Russia targeted military infrastructure. It wanted to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Yes, I said it, because far-right militias like Azov were integrated into Ukraine's armed forces. These groups openly glorify World War II Nazi collaborators.
Let's get this straight. Azov has maybe a few thousand troops, and yes, they had extremist roots. but they've been subsumed under state command, and their influence is wildly exaggerated. You can't label an entire country Nazi because of one battalion, especially not when Ukraine's president is Jewish.
Even if Zelensky's Jewish, he's a figurehead. He bans Russian books, jails political opponents, shuts down media that challenges him. That's not democracy. And Russia didn't invade to take Kiev permanently. It wanted to pressure a negotiated settlement.
Then why target civilians? Why bomb hospitals? Why execute retreating soldiers? You talk of negotiations, but all Russia offered was surrender. Give up Crimea, give up the East, drop your NATO ambitions. That's not negotiation. That's blackmail under gunfire.
Let's not pretend Ukraine was innocent. For 8 years, Donbass residents lived under artillery fire from Ukrainian forces. Thousands of Russian-speaking civilians died. Before 2022, that blood matters too.
I'm not denying that war crimes can happen on both sides, but nothing excuses what Russia has done. The scale, the brutality, the lies. This isn't liberation. It's imperial nostalgia dressed as national security.
The war didn't just affect Ukraine and Russia, it shook the entire world. Let's talk geopolitics.
Russia was backed into a corner. You think it wanted this war? No, it wanted security guarantees. No NATO in Ukraine, no nuclear weapons on its borders. But the West refused. Instead, they armed Ukraine and waited for Russia to act.
They armed Ukraine after 2014 to help it defend itself, because Russia had already taken Crimea and stoked a separatist war in Donbass. You can't blame the world for trying to stop your slow-motion land grab.
What land grab? Russia's security concerns are real. The US has 800 military bases around the globe. Imagine if China built a base in Havana. That's how Russia views NATO in Ukraine. It's not paranoia. It's history. Napoleon, Hitler. Invaders always came through Ukraine.
So now Russia gets to own Ukraine because of what Napoleon did 200 years ago? That's the logic of empire, not security. Russia wants to keep its neighbors weak and obedient, not free and democratic.
The West isn't interested in Ukrainian democracy. It's interested in using Ukraine as a pawn to weaken Russia. They push sanctions, send tanks, deliver long-range missiles, and who pays the price? Ukrainians, on the front lines, and Russians too.
You're right that ordinary people suffer, but the blame lies with the one who pulled the trigger. The fact that countries across Europe, from Sweden to Finland, are rushing into NATO now shows how terrified they are of Russia. You've united them like never before.
Or maybe they're just falling for propaganda. The US profits from endless war. Arms sales are through the roof. Who benefits from a long war? Certainly not Ukrainians.
You want to talk profit? What about Russia's arms sales to Iran and North Korea? What about energy blackmail? Turning off gas to Europe? This war is hurting everyone. But pretending Russia is some reluctant giant just defending its doorstep? No. This was planned, premeditated, imperial.
Let's shift to morality. War is hell, but there are laws. Geneva Conventions, basic ethics. Who bears moral responsibility for the suffering?
Russia. That's where the blame lies. Bucha, Mariupol, Irpin, mass graves, raped civilians, tortured prisoners, and they keep denying everything, calling it staged. That's not just war. That's evil wrapped in denial.
Are you done? You speak like a prosecutor, not a truth seeker. Russia denies many of those accusations because evidence is shaky and it's coming from biased Western media and NGOs. Meanwhile, no one talks about Ukraine shelling Donetsk for years. Homes, schools, children.
Because Russia controls Donetsk now. Journalists can't even go there freely. And shaky evidence? The UN, Amnesty International, HRW, they've documented these crimes. Are you going to call them all CIA puppets too?
Let's talk about Ukraine's war crimes. Torturing POWs, filming executions, parading dead Russian soldiers online. That's also a violation of Geneva Conventions. You don't get a free pass just because you're the underdog.
No one's denying that isolated incidents happen, but there's a difference. In Ukraine, they're prosecuted, condemned. In Russia, they're denied or celebrated. Wagner mercenaries were pardoned murderers. And you call that a liberating force?
Wagner's gone. And speaking of mercenaries, how about the foreign fighters in Ukraine? Americans, Brits, even ISIS-linked individuals. Ukraine accepts anyone with a grudge against Russia.
Because the world sees Ukraine's fight as just. Volunteers join the underdog. Russia is conscripting men off the street. Scared kids and old men. That's not noble. That's desperation.
And yet those conscripts are fighting because they believe this war is existential. Russia is defending its soul, its identity. For them, NATO encroachment and Ukrainian nationalism aren't abstract threats. They're personal.
So it's about identity now? You started with NATO and security. Now it's a holy war for the Russian soul? That's exactly why the world sees this as dangerous. It's not strategy. It's ideology.
Let's look ahead. What's the end game? Is peace even possible?
Eventually, yes, but not with this current Ukrainian government. They've tied their fate to the West. Zelensky won't negotiate unless Russia leaves every inch, and that's not realistic. Crimea is gone. So is most of Donbass.
No, what's not realistic is expecting Ukraine to surrender its land. Peace doesn't mean submitting to a bully. If they stop fighting, they lose their country. If Russia stops, the war ends.
So you'd rather Ukraine be flattened into rubble than talk peace? At what cost? Millions displaced, economy in ruins, entire cities destroyed. What's the plan? Wait until Putin dies and hope for a better Russian leader.
Honestly, maybe. Because this regime in Moscow doesn't want peace. It wants dominance. Ukraine's fighting for survival, and frankly, for Europe's security. If Russia wins here, Moldova is next. Then maybe the Baltics.
That's paranoia. Russia has no desire to invade NATO. It wants respect, not expansion. If the West stopped flooding Ukraine with weapons and encouraged real diplomacy, this war could have ended months ago.
And what would Russia offer in return? More lies? More Minsk-style agreements to buy time for another invasion? Trust was shattered in 2014. The only thing Putin respects is resistance.
You can't defeat a nuclear power through force. At some point, someone has to sit down and compromise. That means territorial concessions. Painful, yes, but realistic.
And what happens when other dictators see that strategy works? You set a precedent. Grab land, wait out the outrage, keep it. That's not peace. That's appeasement. And we've seen where that leads before. 1938, anyone?
We'll now move to final statements. Keep them brief.
This war is tragic, but it didn't start in 2022. It began when the West tried to make Ukraine a proxy, ignoring Russia's security concerns and historical ties to the region. Russia isn't perfect, far from it, but neither is the West. You can't build peace by ignoring context. This is a war provoked, not chosen.
No, this is a war started by Russia. Period. Ukraine wanted freedom, dignity, and sovereignty, and got tanks in return. You can blame NATO, blame the US, blame history, but missiles don't launch themselves. The blame belongs to the one who invaded. And Ukrainians are fighting with courage, not hate, for a future they deserve.
While both sides presented strong cases rooted in history and national interest, one offered a clearer chain of causality, grounded in international law, in sovereignty, and in moral clarity. The winner of this debate is Mark. If you found this enlightening, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who still believes in nuance.